Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Vichess, and this time we will be talking about the Endgames. This is part 4. In the previous 3 chapters, we have covered some of the most interesting endgames connected to the basic ones, also mostly focused about everything what every chess player needs to know. Today will be the continuation of it, and mostly we'll be focusing on the pawn endgames, which happens quite frequently, and it is one of the most, I would say, challenging thing to learn because you actually have to memorize a couple of moves by heart. You need to know exactly how to respond in different occasions. So it's not an easy task, let's say, shortly. So before I start, I'll just check out the technical details of the live stream if everything is settled, and I will get started. Just a moment. Let's see if everything is settled. I believe it's all good. Just takes a little bit of time to update the system and for it to be detected. So just a moment. Seems like just a little technical issue there is, but nothing major. We will be able to do the stream normally. Okay, I believe it's all good now. Okay, everything is settled. Very good. And the technical aspects are also good. Fantastic. All right. So without further ado, let's get right into that. For the first example, we have this legendary variation in front of us. Both of the sides have one pawn on the board, and we need to figure out what is the best way to proceed further. Of course, it would be quite logical to go after the pawn all the way to a7, capture it, and maybe go to king b7, king a7, win the pawn, while black tries to do the same, connect to the a pawn, and it depends who will be faster. If we look at the situation a bit more in depth, we understand that if we try to play king e7, black goes king b3, let's say king d7, b4, c7, b5, and it does look like we're about to grab the pawn on a7 and the game is just over. But it's not as simple as it looks like, because when we try to go on this direction, when black realizes that they don't have enough time to capture the a6 pawn, and they're losing the a7 pawn, they're trying their best to shift the focus towards the drawish setup. So whenever our king ends up on a7, black wants to have the king standing on c7. And when the king gets there, white will be into zugzwang situation, and if king a8, king c8, and the king will be stuck. So if white proceeds further with king e7, black would love to go for king c3, and this is the continuation. And black chooses this direction just because they don't want to go directly to b5. Doesn't matter if we go that way or this way, it's going to be the same distance, absolutely, but it's better to be far away from the enemy's king. And when the situation arises, we already know that this is just going to be a draw. The fastest of all is to play king b6, force a7, and go back on c7. This is a draw, no questions asked. Okay, so if we go back, then we have this question in mind that, well, it does look like if we go after the pawn, black will be in time to bring the king on c7, and at the end of the day, we get nothing. Is there something we can change? Yes, actually, there is a good possibility. When we know that black's plan is to go around from this direction, we don't have to go directly towards the pawn. We can try to use this option And we will be preventing the enemy's king to get towards this option and get to c7 at the end of the day. So white starts with king e6 rather than going on king e7. Let's say king c3 and king d5. This is a critical moment of the game, preventing king d4 idea. White brings the king all the way to b7, grabs the pawn, and it's finished. Let's say king d3, king c6, d4, b7. At the end of the day, white just captures it, and it's easily winning for white. Okay, so king e6, d5, and then going to b7. Not so common technique, I would say. Probably in your games, you will have it quite rarely, this kind of situations. But, well, if it rises, don't forget this maneuver as well. You don't have to go directly from e7 to a7. You can try to use the king diagonal. Next example, we have got the situation where it is a black to move. So I'll flip the board. And what should black play? Well, we have a lot of pawns on the board, 1, 2, 3, and 4. On the other hand, white has got 1, 2, 3, and 4. So we should try somehow to create a passed pawn, because clearly white's king is way more active. He's about to crowd the pawn on a4, then potentially come after the pawn on d5 as well. Our king is so far away from any action, and at the end of the day, it seems like we're just going to lose the game without fighting much. Okay, then what can we try? In these kind of situations, try your best to create a passed pawn by all costs, because you know that the time doesn't work out well for you, and you know that time is ticking. You are trying to play as quick action as possible. So black goes a3. Attacking the pawn on b2. If white takes b takes a3, let's say, then we are happy to push the pawn forward, and this pawn is unstoppable. On the other hand, white doesn't have any other good option. King is not in time to do anything. And in case of b3, we can also take this pawn a2, and the pawn gets promoted. So in this kind of scenarios, if you see two pawns standing next to each other, consider pushing the pawn on a3 or c3, depending on the occasion. a3 works out really well, because when the pawn takes, the pawn is crushing through. And if c3 and b takes c3, then we don't get anything, because there is no passer. So black wins by pushing the pawn. Next example. Oh boy. White to move. 4 pawns versus 4. Symmetrical pawn structure. And as we already mentioned in the past, getting an passer is going to value a lot. So if we get a chance somehow to maneuver the pieces and get to the right position, it's going to be a game changer for us. How do we get a passer? If in the symmetrical structures especially, it's not going to be an easy task to create a passer. So we actually have a good chance to do that. How? If we go for b takes a5, b takes a5, this position will be lost for us in the future, because black has the extremely powerful king. Maybe we might miraculously survive, giving up a pawn, black going after that, then we capture this direction, but still. The thing is that black has way more active king, and black is the one which dictates the result of the game. Okay, that doesn't work. b5 will lead into same bracket, because let's say we take, king goes on e5. We can try to make a draw, probably, potentially, by moving the pieces back and forth, but it's not going to happen immediately, because there will be king e3, the king will be going on f5, white wants to go after the pawn on b6. It's possible to have some options, but it's not the best shot. Is there a way to create a passed pawn in this situation? Actually, white has got a great opportunity for that. And the best move is c5. And what happens next? If after c5, white takes a takes b4, we take it back with the pawn and we're about to promote on b8. If black takes b takes c5, we're happy to grab the pawn on a5. Black is unable to stop the pawn. If they try to bring the king closer, we promote. And since it's not possible, then they should try something else, like pushing the pawn forward, go on c4, potentially c3. It also doesn't change anything, because the moment black tries to go here, we push, and the pawn can easily get stopped by the king. Enemy's king is doing nothing, and white wins. After c5, potentially black might try to go for b5, which is a very important moment of the game. I believe white has a couple of good ways to win, but b takes a5 stands out the most. And what happens? If b takes a4, we go a6. We are way faster. If b4, which looks quite tempting, in case of a6, I'm not sure. The queen ending should be winning probably for white, but it's not worth it to go for it at all. We can try to bring the king on e3, and in case of b3, bring it closer and capture the pawn. And whenever we do that, it's not like black is about to stop our own pawn. No, it's not happening because the pawn is really fast. And white wins the game. So in this kind of scenarios, especially when you have the king worsely located, always pay attention to some potential breakthroughs. It might be happening on the board, and don't miss this opportunity. Okay. Hello, Abdul Rahman. Welcome on board. Thanks for joining. Okay, next position. Position number 23. Playing with the white pieces, and we need to figure out if there is a way to create a passed pawn, because we know how powerful the passed pawn is in this kind of occasions especially. And we make it work somehow? Actually, yes. White has a couple of good ways for that, but let me show you one of them. Our opponent has got a protected passed pawn, even though we have an extra pawn because black has 4 pawns. On the other hand, we have 5. It's not that simple. This pawn ties down our king. We can't just freely go here because there's d3 and the pawn is getting promoted. Otherwise, if we just hang around on d3, d3, e4, it's not going to change anything either. Black is just dominating. If we go for something like g6, it looks cool on the first glance, but after king f6, the pawn is not going to get promoted by itself. And if we don't do any kind of breakthrough, it's going to be a big problem. So how should we play? Actually, I like the fact that in chat already people started recommending the moves. Thank you everyone for tuning in, and your comments are always greatly appreciated. So please feel free to join. And well, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, like the stream, subscribe if you haven't done so. It's still early stages, and you know how difficult it is to do the streams from early stages, and I definitely have your hope, guys. So white can try to go for b4. It actually looks like a complete disaster because we are giving up a pawn again, and for what reason you might ask, but it has a very specific reason. Because when we push it, if black is going to take it with the c pawn, we can grab on d4, and this time we're going to have 2 passed pawns at the same time, while the b4 pawns means nothing, because in case of b3 we'll just come down with king c3. And black is unable to stop both of the pawns. They are so far away from each other, meaning that black cannot stop it. Okay, then how about a takes b4? We actually don't really care about this either. We can go king d3. This king will be capable of stopping both pawns, b4 and d4 at the same time, meaning that we can enjoy creating a passer on one of the flank, and black will not be able to save this position anymore. So in this type of situations, if you have an extra pawn, I know it might not look like b4 is the way to go on the first glance, because we give up a pawn, and black also maintains the protected passed pawn, but sometimes it is mandatory to create passers very far away from each other, so the enemy's king cannot hunt them down. So b4 is a very beautiful looking move. Well done everyone, which spot. Okay, next example, and this time we have got knights on the board. Probably you're a bit surprised, because we mentioned that the discussion will be about the pawns, but yeah, it's quite a close call, in my opinion. White is doing absolutely fine, and the position looks quite nice to play as well. So, is there any good way for white to proceed further in this situation? Does anyone have any recommendations? Let me know in chat. Trousers, as Daniel called them. Okay, nice one. I didn't know about it. Definitely rest in peace for Daniel Naroditsky. Really big authority for chess, and he's let's say whatever he has done for chess definitely will not be forgotten. Okay, what do we have? Knight g7. Yes, indeed, you got this right. Knight takes g7 is actually a very good way to play. We take the pawn because we would like to push the pawn forward. Usually, knight is a terrible piece when it comes to stopping the pawns like this. And after taking on g7, knight takes in h6. And look how bad this knight is for stopping the rook's. We're about to crush through, go h7, h8, and it doesn't look like black has got much happening in this situation. In case black's knight takes it, there is no way out, there is no check to include it anywhere, but black shouldn't be taking it. Probably knight g5 is a must, but at this point the question is it going to be a draw or white can win the game? With very precise play, I believe it's going to be a draw. It's tough to pull off this h6, h7 idea, and probably nothing major. Something like that, king e7 is possible to play next, so black is doing absolutely fine at the end of the day. But still, knight g7 is a good firework, and you need to hope that your opponent is going to capture. Next example. And this time we have got the queens and the rooks on the board as well. But I do firmly believe that it shouldn't be a big of a challenge for you, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm sure you will be able to find it very quickly. So anyone in chat, whoever is there, do you have any special recommendation? Meanwhile, give it a like to the live stream. Let's go up to 10 likes. I know we can make it work. I have hope for your support. Let's go up to 10 likes. And let me know, what do we play with white? Position looks quite complex, no doubt. So it's mandatory to play it quite precisely, as you can see. Queen going on f6, rook takes b6. Yes, so these are the two moves which needs to be calculated. Obviously, we don't have this situation for the purpose of who is going to do better. Let's say if we just move the rook away or queen normally without any captures, who is better? We're just about to get checkmated, so it's mandatory to hurry up. Therefore, here, white needs to decide either to take on b6 or f6. If we take on b6, black is going to take it back with the queen. Queen f6 check, and the king goes on c5. The question is, are we capable of winning this position? Actually, no. The pawn on b5 will be lost very soon. If the queens get traded, the b5 pawn will be lost. Otherwise, we can probably start giving checks, something like that, king b4, giving this, but nothing is going to change. b5 pawn will be gone sooner or later. All right, then, if not rook b6, can we get queen f6 then in action? Looking at the tactics, it actually works out well, surprising. We take it, and when the queen takes back as the only option, because it also gives a check, which is quite annoying for black, we're going to play rook b6. It's the king and the rook, not the queen at the same time. If the king comes up, rook takes f6, king takes f6, and we go b6. Pawn is about to get promoted. Just because we did the operations of the trades, but it's just a matter of where are we going to do it, on f6 or b6. If we start with rook b6, queen b6, and then this, the king ends up on b6 at the end of the day and stops the pawn. If we start with the queen takes f6, now what black's king ends up on f6 square, which changes everything. because the pawn at this point is unstoppable. That's it. Next example. Well done, everyone, which spotted. Oh, this is quite an interesting one. How should we play? We have queens, bishops, pawns also on the board, but we're not really scared of that, right? Because we got this. What is the move we need to play? Seems like it's really silent in chat. This position is quite complex. No, Cornelius exactly got this. Yes, yes, yes. Well done, well done. Everyone actually pointed out all of a sudden the correct move. I think there's a considerable amount of delay, and that's the main reason on the stream why my speech comes actually a bit later to you. So yeah, we actually have a chance to go for a queen g8 right now, which looks amazing. Because at the end of the day, we're trading off the pieces, and here we must take it with the pawn. Please bear in mind, bishop takes g8. Black is not forced to take it back at all. So we promote to the queen at the same time. Rook takes g8, bishop g8. Black is unable to push the pawn forward because our bishop is in time, and after king g8, we have got a4. This pawn is running down the board, black can't stop it, and when it comes to the e-pawns, we can just bring the king up, and it's easier. We can go from this direction, or a king on f3, e2, etc., and white is doing absolutely fine at the end of the day. So yeah, queen g8, right in time. Always look at pawn endgame transpositions, because sometimes you will face the situation which is so easily winning for you, and you should consistently look at this kind of opportunities. I've seen a lot of people just ignoring it, and they definitely have regretted later. Okay, moving on to the next one, playing with the black pieces. We would like to get into comfortable pawn ending. Does black have a chance to break through and make the magic work? Let me know in chat, guys. What do you think? Is it a possibility? Trade and promote. Yes, you are absolutely right. We have got a chance to trade off the pieces by pushing the pawn on e4. Our c-pawn isn't going so far, because white's bishop just is there. If something, the king is nearby as well. But right after we push e4, if white takes bishop e4, which is the only shot, like if the king goes away, we're just going to take it. And then we take it back with the knight. Luckily, we are controlling the f-pawn. It's not running down the board at all. And now, if the king takes on e4, we have got c2 followed by c1. And white is too slow in promotion. That's why black wins the game. So e4 in this situation works out very well. Okay, next example. Oh, this is way more complicated than it looks. As you already noticed, these are the type of positions where we trade off the pieces and transpose into the pawn ending, which should be comfortable at the end of the day, but it requires quite precise play. What do we play? Any suggestions for white? Let me know in chat. What should we do? We can try to take on c6. But black will respond with the same move. King takes c6. And then if we try to go for a7, it does look like the king is coming on b7 and we can't really make a progress. And that's the time when usually decide with the white pieces, tries to consider some other moves, maybe a check perhaps, or move the queen somewhere else to keep the action going, because it's quite complex. Like you're calculating the direct variations, but it leads to nowhere, so that's not really the way to go. And actually, rather than going for a queen b8, which is an interesting line, by the way, because you want to push the pawn forward, just the main downside is the queen taking here. And if we go for that, there is something which you will not like at all. I was really impressed when I saw this move. It's bishop d8, and look how nice it is. It keeps the queen stuck. And if we just promote on a8, feels like it's just over. Look what like that's like this, and bishop c7 check. So one of the queen needs to give up, and this position is not going to be a draw. Black has two extra pawns, no perpetual check right away, so black is winning. That's why here we actually have such a fancy option. Queen takes c6, well done, I see it in chat. King takes c6, and knight d6. What a move. Like, imagine your opponent thinks that, okay, I'm about to hold the pawn on a6, I'm not capable of promoting, and all of a sudden the knight is under attack. If we're covering up the b7 square. If king d6, there is a7, and even though black has got the bishop and two pawns against the queen, it means nothing whatsoever. And if black tries to go for a king c7, we can play a7 followed by a8, and there is no good way to make a progress later. So definitely very beautiful. Trade off the queens, put the knight on d6, and the game is over. Any questions in chat? And meanwhile, give it a like, please, to live stream. Let's go up to 10 likes. I know we can make it work together. Help me break the record. All-time record we have had on this channel was 20 likes, but I'm certain today is the day to cross that. Okay, next example. What do we have? We have got rooks and the bishops also on the board with an extra b pawn. As you can see, our opponent's threat is to grab the bishop as soon as possible. And we kind of need to do something about it, right? Bishop c3, they will trade off the rooks as well. And what's the follow-up? First thing to calculate for sure is what if we play rook takes g7? And for example, when our opponent takes it back, we want to go for b4 followed by b5 and start marching the pawn forward. Sorry, not b4, maybe bishop takes g7, king takes g7. It's the easiest. And now b4, are we in time? Let's figure it out. I never recommend to any of my students to calculate with the rule of a box, even though it exists. I'll just tell you theoretically how it is, and just try to calculate it throughout rather than just paying attention to the theoretical aspect, please. So white has got 1, 2, 3, 4 squares promotion, meaning that you need to count the same on the side of the board. 1, 2, 3, 4. So if enemy's king can get inside this box, in this case, the pawn will be stopped. And who is making these calculations like that into the squares? If the king is inside or not. All you have to do is just to look at it. King f7, b5, e7, b6. Is black in time or not? And actually, yes, black is in time. We go with b5, king goes here, b6 here, and if b7, the king goes on c7. The pawn is already covered up. We can't really make a progress anymore, which automatically means black is going to make a draw. But there is something which we have missed in the calculation. We said about rook g7, and we only calculated bishop g7. Is there a better way that we can play in this situation? Ladies and gentlemen, feel free to write it in chat. There are no bad questions, just ask what comes on top of your head in the current situations. It will help me to determine your chess level, so I can easily understand which type of positions I need to break. Hello, Conchita. Welcome on board. b4. Yes, indeed. You got this, ladies and gentlemen. We need to push b4. And what does it change? Now, since the rook is pinned to the king, black is unable to do anything else rather than playing king g8. It's not like h pawn is going to get promoted. Come on, like we all know that the pawn is not going to get promoted to anywhere. But we start with the pawn push and we lead to the same situation where we already have gained one tempo, meaning that we can go b5, b6, and the pawn is getting promoted. Let's say black tries to stop it, but it's not going to change anything. We go to b8 square and the game is over. So very good. I have 2600 on leeches and you. Well done, by the way. We are sharing the same rating, probably. Depends on which one you have it. I think I have 27 in longer time controls. Blitz, I don't know. I don't play much, but I need to use that. Anyhow, we are moving on to the next one. By the way, this is quite complex. I need to admit. We have the bishop endgames, but again, based on the topics, you kind of can grasp it that we are trying to get into the pawn ending somehow. Do you think there is a way for black to break through in this position and find some classy option to win the game? Let's see who will be first in chat to point it out. Meanwhile, we are just 3 likes away to reach 10. Give it a thumbs up, please. What do we have now? Anyone, any thoughts? Bishop d2, Zugzwang. Eva Chess, you are absolutely right. Well done. Well, in this situation, if white has enough time, they would gladly play bishop e3, go for bishop c1, and it's very unclear what is going to happen next. Because if the bishop stands on this diagonal, okay, we understand that our king just looks better on d5. All the pawns stand on the like squares, which is a very good news for us. But what's next? Like, our opponent has some weaknesses. Can we actually attack them? Not really directly. That's why it is in our best interest to start with bishop d2, attack the pawn on f4. If white takes it, we are going to take it back with the king. We have way more active king. We'll be happy to grab the pawn on f4, potentially e5, push the f-pawn forward and win the game. So after bishop d2, if white brings the bishop back on e3, we're going to take it, king takes c3 and king c4. Later, we're happy to go for king b3, king a3 ideas. Just grab the pawn on a3 and we will follow it with the pawn on b4 as well. And black gets everything needed in this situation. So that's definitely a good one, no doubt. White is just lost. If the bishop goes somewhere, we are happy to take the pawn here. e5 will also follow. And, well, black has got a lot of extra central pawns. Next example, it is white to play and win the game. I will just highlight one detail that we are playing with the white pieces. This pawn is going into this direction. I know some of the pawns just look quite odd, and it's not so easy to determine which pawn is going into which direction, but here we go. Well, how can we play in this situation? We really want to make the f-pawn promote to the queen. On the other hand, black wants to play queen c1 followed by queen a1 right away, so we don't have enough time to push the pawn forward. We can potentially take on b2, but that would lead to some checks, either queen d4 or queen f2, and at the end of the day, we don't get a nice position at all. So, how should we play? Here, the best possible shot for white is to go for concrete calculation. And Ghosty, you are absolutely right. We have b4 takes the king and the queen at the same time. If black takes with the king, we're happy to play queen e7, pinning the queen along this diagonal. And if we takes it, pawn takes back, and this guy is getting promoted. Black's pawns on e5 and g5 are quite slow. They're not going anywhere, so we're happy with the outcome. Let's say e4, e8, g4, e8, regardless, white is just winning. If we go back, it is clear that king can take it. How about the queen takes here? And this is the tricky part. White has some opportunities now, let's say, including queen e5, f7. But if black just starts giving us some checks, we are getting into huge trouble, guys. Like, there is no good comeback from there. So it's kind of mandatory to react accordingly. And what is the best possible continuation? Probably are wondering. Well, the best shot in this situation is to go queen a2 check. We just want to make sure that the queens are getting traded. Let's say if the queen goes here, we're going to take it and the pawn gets promoted. And if the king goes on b6, we take queen b2. The queens will get traded and the pawn is about to get promoted on f8 as well. So there is not much black can do about it. Luckily, our pawn is too fast that we do not fear any of black's pawns, and white wins the game on spot. King is also unable to stop it, and it is 1-0 on the. Next example, we have playing with the white pieces, queen versus e pawn, and it is white to move. Do you guys think that this position is winning for white, or it's going to be a draw? Because some of you probably have heard about it, that there are moments when it's going to be a draw, and there are situations when it is a victory. It just depends which one you're going to choose. So does anyone have thoughts about it? What do you think? Draw or win? If it is a win, let's say, which technique do you think we need to use? Like, what move is the best? And so on. As I see in chat, a lot of you are saying that white should be winning, and actually you are absolutely right. The best possible continuation here is queen e3. When it comes to queen versus pawn, it's mandatory to realize that if your opponent has got the rook pawn or the bishop pawn, A, H, C, and F, in this case, it depends on the location of our king, but black has way higher chances of making a draw, or it might be a draw right away because of some stalemate ideas. But when it comes to more or less central pawns like b2, d2, e2, and g2, it's actually winning regardless of where our king stands, as long as we can deliver check. So in this situation, it's mandatory to remember that the queen needs to end up on one of these three key squares. And our main goal is to force the enemy's king to stand in front of the pawn, use the momentum and bring our king even closer, because queen alone cannot win the e-pawn, unfortunately. And when the king approaches, we will easily chop off the e-pawn and win the game. So currently, as you can see, black threatens to promote the pawn to the queen, so it's not possible that we can do something about it. That's why queen e3 makes perfect sense. Challenging the pawn on the e-file, king d1 is the only possible shot, and we have got queen d3 check. What happens next? King needs to go on e1, there is no other option, and we bring the king already on d4. The king goes on f2, not on f1, because always pay attention. Whenever your opponent makes a move, does your opponent threaten to promote the pawn? If the answer is no, then you can just continue bringing the king closer. So now king e3 would just win. But here black just goes king f2. And after that, there is either queen e3 or queen d2. But queen e3 is the best shot, as I mentioned, one of these three squares. And king f1. Black tries to be more resilient because the pawn is about to get promoted on e1. But in this case, we've got queen f3 check. King e1 is the only shot, and we play king d3. Later, the pawn is going to get lost, and white makes a checkmate as well, comfortably. So, in this kind of scenarios, don't forget, D, D, E, and G pawns are the losing ones. A, C, F, and H pawns, in this case, you have some decent amount of chances to push for the win. If king is on e2 and pawn on f2, it's a draw. Yes, it is. If your opponent has got the bishop pawn, it is going to be a draw because of some stalemate ideas. Okay, The next example. Well, let's imagine hypothetically that the h3 pawn doesn't exist and it is white to move. The thing is that when we force the enemy's king to stand in front of the pawn, this is our ideal version, right? And whenever the king stands there, this is the momentum. We use it to bring our own king closer to the pawn. It's not actually happening at the moment because if we start marching the king down, let's hypothetically imagine the h3 pawn doesn't exist, okay? It's a stalemate. And if we try to move the queen away, let's say queen a3, etc., there's going to be king b1 and we don't have a good follow-up. But you know what's the surprising factor? When your opponent has the extra pawn on h file, it might be considered one of the strength, because why not, actually? If we somehow manage to, push the pawn forward, distract the enemy's queen, we will be quite happy. But no, it's not the main situation, because now we have got this pawn running down the board on h2, h1, but we can actually stop it. So here comes queen c2, threatening to go for queen c1 later. And what is black going to do? h2, only option. They really wish they wouldn't have the h-pawn, but sometimes you end up in the situations when there is no way out. And black is forced to push it, and there is queen c1. So if you play with the queen and you notice your opponent has the a-pawn like that, actually try to not grab the h-pawn as well, because this might help you to win the game. I know it sounds very weird to say that your opponent just having a pawn is going to help you, but this is how it works. Pay attention to the details, please. All right, next example. We have got the situation where a black has the queen versus the h-pawn. If the pawn would be, and the pawn is going down on that direction. If white's pawn would be standing on h7, it would automatically be a draw. Like, there is absolutely no way around, because the king is so far away from anything, and it's just a simple draw. But in the current situation, it's not as simple. And let me clarify. When white's pawn still stands on h7, it's not a good idea at all, actually. The position is going to get lost. What is our goal? We need to force white's king to go on h7. Later, we put the queen on g5. And then white will have only one move left, which is king h8. And exactly at that time, we are planning to chop off the h6 pawn. So now, black can start giving checks. The move like soft move like queen g6, queen g5 definitely is not going to work. So we give a check. We want to approach the king and bring closer actually to the pawn. Let's say king g8, queen d5, for example, king g7, and queen g5 check. What happens next? White is forced to play king h7. And that's the moment we already use our king. Not necessarily to deliver mate immediately or to support us to win the pawn, but pay attention to the position. If it is your opponent's move, it's lost. So we just play king b7. And when white, let's say, goes back on h8, we're going to grab the pawn on h6 as well and win the game. So that's it. There's not much white can do about it. So in these situations, if your opponent needs two moves, bring the king, queen closer, and don't let your opponent to escape. Next example, we have got quite an interesting one, by the way. Okay, black has got the a-pawn, but is it going to be a draw or white can win the game? Let me know in chat, guys. What do you think? It is white to move. Draw or win? Also, don't forget to click the like button. Let's go up to 10 likes. It's highly appreciated. And we are just 12 subscribers away to reach 300. So support me, ladies and gentlemen, for that. It will not be forgotten, and it will give me even more motivation to continue doing the educational streams. Me and Grandmaster Arkady Naidich. It is a new channel, and we definitely need your support to grow it bigger as soon as possible. King b4, a1 queen, and king b3. You're absolutely right. In this case, actually, our king stands really close. So if the king would be 1 light year away on a8, clearly it's going to be a draw, but not in this scenario. We will start with king b4. And when black presses and promotes, because there is nothing else, we're going to play king b3. Remember this. If your opponent promotes to the queen, it doesn't mean that it's the end of the game and it ends with a draw. So pay attention. Thereafter a1 queen, we have got king b3. And this queen is unable to go on anywhere good square because there are plenty of checkmate ideas and it's impossible to protect them all. So even though black promotes, white wins the game. Next example. Okay, that's a really good one, looking at it from the black side. And well, it is black to move, queen's on the board. This pawn is going into this direction, white wants to do it here. What should we play? It is mandatory to do things with the checks. Just bring the king closer. Looks like a smart option because there is a checkmate threat coming up, but it doesn't do much because white will be able to give us some checks later. We need to move the king away and everything goes upside down. So instead of that, we can try to go for maybe queen f4 check and the king goes here. Actually, this position is still winning for black, but this is just the wrong direction. There is something much better than that. Always pay attention and look at the concrete calculation, because if things are done properly, it's just game over. You win the game on spot. So black has got such an amazing resource, g3 check. And now white is forced to take it, no other way around. We give a check, and when the king stands along the h-file, we will go for queen h1 check, and let's say king goes on g3 or g4, we are going to grab on h8, and the game is over. White wins the game without a ton of difficulty, as you can see. Quite a nice one, no doubt, very beautiful technique, and it is forced. White can't avoid that at all. Next example. We have got to the rook ending with the extra f pawn. Black is standing into a passive defense. They have the king there and the rook standing on c8, and they are really planning to hold it together. It would be a draw if not, let's say, in this kind of situations, the f pawn. If it is, let's say, h, g, b, or a pawns, so the rook pawn or the knight pawn, it's going to be a draw. Because passive defense does enough job. Black can just stay here, move the king back and forth, but not when it comes to from c file to f file. Because now what white can do is to play rook h7. And what is black going to do? King g8 is the only option, pretty much, because rook h8 is coming. They can try to bring the king on the direction, but it's going so far away from anything. White is promoting the pawn and it's over. So after rook h7, if black plays king g8, we are going to play f7, king f8, and rook h8, grabbing the rook on c8, and this game is over. Nothing black can do about it. So yeah, f pawn, c pawn to the f pawn is winning for white for sure, in case black goes for the passive defense. Another important example, playing with the white pieces. Yes, as you can see, rook takes h8 is one of the move, and of course we should be calculating the moves like that, because if you win the rook and you can get away with it, I mean, what else could be better than that? But it actually doesn't quite work out well, because it's a stalemate, right? So we take it. The king has no squares on the back rank, can't go on d7 or f7 either, and that's it. Not much is happening. All right then, is there any other way to play? Actually, yes. We go for rook a7 check, force the king to go down on one of the square, because there's not much happening for sure. So let's say, hypothetically, king e8. We don't do that to go rook a8 and win the rook, because we are going into the same circle. The king comes up, we take on h8, and it's a stalemate. But rather than that, we go king d6, covering up the 7th rank and planning to go for rook a8 on the very next move. What is black going to do is quite unclear. They could try to move the king away and run away from it, but it's not just happening because we will take it. King takes e7 and the pawn is getting promoted. So in these situations, ladies and gentlemen, don't think that rook h8 is the only possible continuation here. There are some other opportunities as well. And if your opponent just lets you take the rook, it means absolutely nothing. You can try to prolong the process a little bit and try to grab on h8 normally. Okay, next example. We have another rook ending, and this time I actually want you guys to solve it. It is very important to see. We have got the a pawn, which is running down the board. Clearly, our king is so far away. Black would love to bring the rook on a3 and bring the king all the way to in front of the pawn on a7 as well. So if we are somehow trying to make a good progress, we must really hurry up in this situation. So, any thoughts? How should we make a progress? a7 is recommended. I see it in chat. What's the idea of a7? Let's say in case of a rook a3, for example, a7, rook a3. What does white do next? That's a very interesting question to ask. a7, rook a3, and rook h8. Well, good thinking process indeed, because it is a typical idea. We want to promote the pawn to the queen. I mean, these checks just don't change anything. We're just going to approach the rook and that's it. So if the rook goes on a3, yes, we go rook h8. We threaten to promote, so it forces black to take it, which leads to rook h7. The skewer attacks the king, goes away, and we grab the rook on a7. But what if I told you that a7 is actually a blunder? And there is a reason for that. Why is a7 a blunder? What does black have? What we missed? Also, guys, we're just 10 subscribers away to reach the milestone 300 subs, so just subscribe if you haven't done so. A lot of interesting educational material we are covering on daily basis, me and Super Grandmaster Arkady Naidich, so support us on our journey. Yes, actually, you know what's the problem? No, not king g7, we can promote it, and the queen versus rook is winning. Rook d8. We make a draw. Rook a8 is coming. No tricks. We go here, rook a8. The king will approach way sooner than ours, and black can just take the pawn on a7. If we go rook a7 check, what does it change? The king is just getting to b6 square, rook a8, rook a7, and done. So what should we do then? Well, we don't have a7. It's not winning. We should start with rook h8. That's a beautiful motive. We threaten a7, and we kind of force black to go for this. And if that happens, we already know that it's winning. We are preventing any rook d8 business. And if the rook goes on d7, we can push this, and pawn is getting promoted as well. So it doesn't really change much. Rook h8 wins the game. a7 makes a draw. Tricky, but mandatory to remember. Next example. Looking at it from white's perspective. We have got 2 extra pawns, but it's very tricky situation. Let's imagine we don't have the f pawn. Okay, the pawn is pushed so fast forward that there, if we try to go for a king b6, try to protect the pawn and move the rook away, it's not going to happen, end up really well, because there comes rook b1 check. And there is going to be endless amounts of checks, no hiding square for the king. And when the king goes really too close down to the rook, black is going to play this. Rook is unable to leave due to losing the a7 pawn, and that's it. But here is one big problem in black's camp. That here, black needs to play king h7, king g7. They cannot have the king somewhere else. Let's say if they have it somewhere on f6 and not on this 7th rank, we can give a check and promote the pawn. If something like king f7, for example, black is trying to approach this, we have got, let's say not king b6, for example, king b5, king f7. We have got this beautiful move, rook h8. We have seen this motive already in the previous example, and some of you have already pointed out what's the best way to play. In case of rook a7, we go rook h7 and grab the rook, otherwise a8 is threatened, so it's over. So black has only two squares, h7 and g7. But what white has right now is f6. We are just using our pawn to distract the enemy's king, and they can no longer just stay like that. If king f6, we have got rook f8 and we are going to promote it. If king goes on f7, we go rook h8 and we win the game. And if the king goes, let's say, on h7, f7 followed by f8, and white wins the game on spot. So there is nothing black can do. F-pawn is winning. Bear in mind one thing. If white would have the pawn on a7, and either g or h pawns, let's say we're moving it forward and we go for something like g6, it's a draw because we cannot force the king to go somewhere on the wrong square where we can use some kind of tactical shots and do something about it. This is not happening anytime soon, so that's why this will not be a pleasant version at the end of the day. So f6 and winning the game. Next one. Okay, we have got the h pawn. Usually, if your enemy's king stands in front of the pawn and maybe goes all the way to g7 or h7, something like that, we can't push the pawn forward because if we decide to go for it, king h7 will be there, rook b7, king h8, and black can even do the passive defense or Vancouver defense or horizontal one. There are plenty of ideas, and surprisingly, even rook straight is a good idea as well because it's the h-pawn. So no real chances of pressing for anything whatsoever. But here is the main trick. The king is so far away. So can we just push it forward? Yes, we can. We go h6. h7 followed by h8 is a threat. So what is black going to do? This check will not change anything because we'll just go king f4. King f7, not enough time. So if this check, we just can go for a king e5 as well. No issues whatsoever. And it does look like we have got everything settled. But the position is not as easy as it looks, as I probably have said that phrase too many times, and at this point, you already know exactly what I mean. After h6, black continues with this check, and if we go for a king f4 check and we decide to go from that direction, guess what? It's a draw. There is rook f7. And black can bring the king in. If h7, for example, this looks like a winning option, right? Because rook is going to take it. If rook b7, we can grab here as well. But black has got something else. Rook f8. And well, it's a draw. Rook takes, king takes, and the king is getting closer. If we don't take it and decide to give a check or something like that, king just comes up. Rook is holding it from the back rank, and black loses. So, sorry, and white makes a draw. That's why we start with h6, and after check, if rook h1, we have h7. Rook takes h7, rook b7. This idea we have seen, that's why I will not repeat it many times. But there we have got king f5, and when this check comes, king e5 is mandatory. So when our opponent plays rook f8 idea, like last time, we give a check, and when the king goes down, we go h7. And when the rook goes on h8 or something like that, we have enough time to bring the king in. And on this check, if our king stands somewhere else, Black can easily freely move the king on f6 or e6 or any of the squares along these files, which is not a good news for us. But in the current situation, they are forced to go down, which actually is just winning, because it's unavoidable, this rook b8, rook trade, and the pawn promotion to the queen. So yeah, Black actually loses the game, but we need to be cautious. If Black keeps giving checks, now feel free to go on that direction, because if rook h1, we have got h7, maybe another check, king e3, and as long as the rook cannot get the access to the 8th rank, and especially from the f file, we're good to go, because now this rook d8 changes nothing. We're going to take, h7, h8, and white just wins. So h6 is a beautiful idea, h7, and it is 1-0. I have a question for the previous example, and a really good one. Thanks for asking. So, Ghosty, you have mentioned if white would have the e pawn, or let's say some other pawn, right, in the previous position. So bear in mind, if it is the rook pawn or the knight pawn, we can't do much because Black is just moving the king back and forth. If it is more centralized, it doesn't matter. We are winning because we're just going to push e6. If Black will leave it unnoticed, we are going to play e7 as well. So at some point, Black needs to play king f6, and we just give a check followed by promotion. So yes, regardless, the position is winning, and our opponent doesn't have a chance to survive actually from there. Okay, we go to the next position, and we have got the bishop endgame. I don't know how frequently you guys are facing it, but one thing is clear. This h6 pawn is not running around. It is under attack. What does white play in this situation? Position is very tricky, bear in mind. So you need to play properly. Hi, thanks a lot. Really appreciate. Thanks, Hassan. Thanks for saying that kind words, and welcome on the board. Welcome to WeChess. Ladies and gentlemen, give it a thumbs up. Let's break the record, go over 20 likes, and subscribe the channel. We're just 10 subscribers away to reach 300. Let's do it. Can we make it on the stream? I hope so. We have roughly 9-10 positions left to cover for today as well. I'll be very delighted to reach this threshold today as well. So what do we play? I have some recommended moves like bishop g7, king g6, king f8, but then the king goes on h7 and king f7. Nomen is skew. Well done, by the way. This is such a flawless calculation. Bravo. Actually, yes, we can take the bishop because our pawn is the most valuable asset in this position. h7 also doesn't work because the pawn is going to get captured. What else do we have? Like king h6 is a threat. We can take, we can push. Only move is bishop g7. It's such an odd situation that we keep the bishop inside like a cage that it can't really run away. Because if bishop g7, we'll be happy to take it back with the pawn and promote it. So black is going to play king g6. Now the bishop is definitely under attack. Pawn takes and king takes. So bishop h8 would lead to the same problem. That's why our monarch kicks in. Overprotects the bishop, and black is unable to take it because we take it back. If the king goes far away, let's say something like that, we can play king g8. We attack this guy on h8. If takes it, we can take it even back with the king, and pawn gets promoted. So only move here, what black has got is king h7. And it's, I know, such a big surprise, but we can play king f7. And black is in Zugzwang. It was completely unexpected, but here we are. King can't capture the pawn on h6. Excuse me. And black has only one move, which is grabbing here. We take it back, and we get the queen on the very next move. Very creative and a beautiful example indeed. Bishop g7 is such a classy move. And we win the game on spot. Bravo. Nomen Neskio 317. Perfect calculation. Next example. Again, we have got the bishop ending, this time with an extra a pawn. And the good news is that our opponent's king is quite far away. But on the other hand, the road of pawn promotion is more or less covered. So, what should we play? I believe you will not be surprised for me to say that a6 should be the move to start with. But let's say black just stays along the file, along the diagonal, and just goes for something like bishop f2. Let's admit that there is not much black can do about it. They could potentially try this, but it will take really forever to get somewhere. Hello, PGC. Welcome on board. And when the bishop goes here, we can go king b7. In this type of bishop endgames, what matters the most is to cover up this diagonal, and black should have the king standing somewhere like b5, because b6 is the main square where this bishop will get chased away. But it's not happening at the moment. So let's say after king b7, king goes on d7, we go with this, and it is unavoidable. So let's say black stays here, we go there. The bishop leaves the diagonal, white is easily going to promote it. And if the bishop takes here, we will grab it back with the king. And let's say if king c8, a7, and the pawn gets promoted, otherwise there is nothing black can do. Just in case if you end up in this similar situation, position is regardless lost, but I would recommend you to try one more trick, like bishop a7. It's a tricky setup because if white takes it, we have got king c7. So that's pretty much the only shot. But if the bishop goes on b6, we can't survive anymore. We take, and unfortunately a7 comes there. And the king is unable to get in front of the pawn, meaning that this game is over. Okay, next one. We'll look at it from black's perspective. So I will flip the board. And again, we have the bishop ending. And we have got the pawn running down the board. What is the most precise way to win the game? Well, we want to push the pawn all the way to h2. Then bring the bishop to g2, of course. And if it's get traded, we're going to take it back with the queen, and h1 is coming. How is it possible to achieve something like that? Well, we actually have got a chance. Because if we start with the move like bishop g2, looks tempting. We're about to go for it immediately, but there comes bishop d7, and what's our plan? Like, white is staying along this diagonal. We cannot just kick the bishop out from somewhere here. Like bishop c6 is very cheap trick. White just plays bishop c8. And if we try to go for bishop h3, at some point it needs to be played. Like white just plays bishop here. Or something like bishop b5, even better, to have a bit longer diagonal to stop the pawn in case needed. So here, basically after bishop g2, bishop d7, it's all settled. The problem for black is that usually in these scenarios, they're capable of playing bishop f3 followed by g4. But due to perfect location of the king, this is not possible. Okay then. Black needs to start with bishop g4. That looks significantly better. Why? Because we want to push the pawn all the way, and if we get to h2, it's game over, so white must play bishop f1. And this diagonal is very short. So black can play a move which puts white into zugzwang scenario. Bishop f3. Why is it a zugzwang? If you look at it, black actually doesn't threaten anything. Because let's say h3 isn't there, we take it. If bishop g2, we are going to take it. King takes and king h4 is just a draw. But it is white to move. They can't keep the bishop along this diagonal. In case they decided to move it away, this pawn is just crashing through. This bishop is not doing anything anymore. It's well blockaded. And we are forced to move the king away and pay less attention to the h4 weakness, which is going to be easily guarded. So king goes on f5, but black has got bishop g2 now. And well, if the bishop takes on g2, we're going to take it back and promote the pawn to the queen. Otherwise, if let's say bishop going somewhere else, it's so far away from anything. this pawn is crashing through. So it's a beautiful motive. It is a zugzwang where white doesn't have any good options, and it leads to a simple victory for black. All right, next example. We have another bishop endgame, but this time I really do have your hope. I'm quite certain you can find the best possible continuation. Ladies and gentlemen, think please and tell me your thoughts. What should we do now with white? Take your time. Bishop h5. You are absolutely right. Well done. Correct thinking process. We actually really want to push the pawn forward, but it's not happening at the moment because king is going to capture it. So we have got bishop h5 right in time. If black takes here, we're happy to grab it. Extra g pawn is easily winning. So if the king takes, we have h7, and this pawn cannot get stopped. Not much, I would say, technical explanation needed. It's quite straightforward and direct. We push the pawn forward, and that's it. Win the game. Next. Okay, next example. We have spoken about this position, kind of, knight versus pawn, and it is black to move. We need to decide where to move the king. We have it under check, and the knight is trying its best to cover up the c1 square, but if played properly, not for long. So let's move on to the process of elimination. King d2 or king d1, one or another must be played, but let's check it out. If we go king b1, it's such a bad looking move because if we promote, he just takes it. And if we're trying to fight for the win, because we cannot just lose this game. It's okay, technically it's possible if you promote to the knight and you put the king into terrible square, whatever, but come on, like no one is going to do that. So here, white is just approaching with the king. And sooner or later, we can't even go here because of knight b4. So it's just a draw. And otherwise, if we go back and forth, nothing is going to change. So either d2 or d1. d2 is actually much better in this situation. We attack the knight and force this guy to leave the square and prevent this c1 outpost as well. What is white going to do? Any other squares would lead to just promotion, but there is one interesting approach, which is knight c5. In this case, white at least threatens to go for knight b3 in case of pawn promotion and trying to cover it up. But it's not going to work out well because black plays king c3, preventing any of this business and wants to peacefully promote. In case of knight e4 check, we have to play quite carefully. The best possible option is king d3. You might think about this, but there comes knight d2, and again, we're going into the same circle. Knight is very tricky. But we have got king d3. And if the knight goes, for example, here, there is king e2, and the pawn is getting promoted. And if white plays king knight c5, we have got king c4, attacking the knight, covering up both of the key squares, and black is about to promote the pawn to the queen. So here, king d2, king c3, and king c4 ideas is crucial, but please pay attention into a lot of depth. These positions are extremely difficult to calculate it. Don't feel like, okay, I'll just move the king away. Automatically, I'm going to press the pawn forward and I will promote. No, it's not how it works. Okay, moving on to the next example. Let's have a look. We have got an extra pawn in the ending, and we want to promote it. Well, I don't think we are on the level to get tricked anymore in this situation and grab the bishop on before. We know it's a draw because it is a wrong color. bishop, we can't move it somewhere closer, and the pawn is just about to get promoted, right? It's not going to get promoted. Regardless of our efforts, this is quite famous draw. Okay then, we don't take the bishop. What else do we play? Because if we don't do that, let's say, and we tuck the bishop on this direction, white can just play king here. Potentially king f3 looks interesting, but there comes bishop e7 here and bishop d6. How are we planning to press for the win though? Like if we even get the bishop somehow to g3 square, which is a possibility, white wouldn't do anything. They would just walk with the king on g1 and finished. Like we can't even capture it at all. So it's a very bad news for us. Okay, then on the other hand, what should we do? We have a great opportunity to start with h3 right away, and we don't pay attention to the bishop. Luckily, after capture, h2 is there, king can't stop it, nor the bishop, and black wins. So it forces white to play king f1. But there comes king f3. And I know it's odd, but we prevent the bishop to get to d6, and our bishop standing on c7 does a tremendous job covering up the key squares, and white can't win the game. Shocking, but it is what it is. So bishop c5, h2, and they can't win the pawn. It's going to get promoted. All right. And the next example. We are again into some strange territory. And what if I told you that it is white to move and it is checkmate in 2? This is one of the most famous endgame position. I've seen it a lot on the covers of the books as well. It's quite simple and interesting at the same time, because if you know it is from Paul Morphy, yes. If you know the technique, it's quite cool, but if you haven't seen it, it's not so obvious though. Like you need to play quite precisely, and you need to go outside the box. Can we solve it? I think he did it on the other side. Yes, it is on the other side. And you're absolutely right. Opponent has the bishop, rook h7. We cannot make it work because of bishop takes h7. If g takes h7, the bishop will run away, and I don't even think, or even takes actually here, I don't even think we can win that. But we have got such a classy move, rook h6. And look at that. H takes g6 is not possible. If g takes h, there is a checkmate with the pawn, which actually feels amazing when you make a pawn checkmate, especially if you have sacrificed the rook and then you're going to do that. That just feels great. And if black is planning to move the bishop away, let's say on d5 or c4, etc., we will make a checkmate on h7. Beautiful ending, no doubt. Next example, we have got knight versus pawn. Usually, when we fight against the pawns, we are into weaker side. It's not possible to win the game unless there are some very rare occasions, and we should try our best to stop the pawn. And white definitely doesn't struggle to do that, even without the knight, because the king is on a perfect location. But what if I told you that white even has a way to win the game? That would be quite strange, because like knight alone cannot make a checkmate even with the king's help, but this is a bit slightly different situation, because our opponent has got the pawn as well, which prevents the king to run away from there. That's why we play knight d3. Well, king a1 only move. And if black has enough opportunities, they would go king a1, king a2, etc., go back and forth. Not something like a2 because it looks a bit risky. There might be some checkmate ideas, so it is mandatory to do things properly. But after king a1, white has got a beautiful move, knight c1. Covering up the a2 square and waiting for the pawn to get pushed. And when that happens, we play knight b3, checkmate. That's a beautiful sequence, and it works out very well. If you do play, let's say, king c1, the main issue is that there is going to be a2, and black stalemates himself, and there is no check coming up. If we try with king c1 right away after king here, What follow-up do we have? If we move the knight away somewhere on a bad square, there's going to be a2. If we go for that, actually it's still winning, but you need to go back to the original position. So knight d3 is the way to go. We need the c1 square for the knight, because we don't only want to cover up the b3, c5 knight also does the same. But we want to cover up a2 as well, to not let the king to go up. Because if king has two squares, we cannot deliver mate. The king must have only one square available, and in this case, we have a chance to win the game. And this is not an exception. So knight d3, king a1, knight c1, and when a2, white does a beautiful checkmate. And the final position for this stream and Endgames part 4, and we are covering the 100th position of the Endgame series, we have an extra knight. F5 pawn is under attack. That's why in this kind of situations, without hesitation, either you need to go knight g3 or knight d3. Knight g3 looks a bit more logical. We don't have enough time to bring the king closer, of course. We attack the king. What is black going to do? If they just hang around, we are happy to bring the king closer, grab the pawn on f6, and get the victory. But the issue is that black plays king f4, takes the knight, forces it to go away, and grabs the pawn on f5. So for king f4, white can try to move the knight away, but that leads to king f5, and there's nothing happening anymore. We just gave up a pawn, which was the most crucial in this situation. But we can give up the knight instead, because we don't care about it as much as long as we manage to grab the pawn on f6. So we use the knight for holding the stronghold on the f5 square, and when king takes it, we're happy to take the pawn. So we go king d6. Black can't just stay here for long because we'll play king e6, so king g3 is the only move, but that leads to king e6, followed by king takes f6, and white wins the game. So king f4, king takes f6, we're going to move the king away, press the pawn forward, and this is winning. So sometimes you can use this technique, use the knight for the defense and even sacrifice it in order to grab the pawn all the way to f6 and win the game. Well, that's all I wanted to talk about, ladies and gentlemen. This is Endgames part 4, and we have covered 100 position in total over the series of 4 parts. Thank you everyone for watching for today, supporting, for those who just gave up a thumbs up to the like and subscribe the channel. It is highly appreciated, your support. Our main goal is to reach 1,000 subscribers in the beginning, and we are close to 300. It's 291. So I would highly appreciate it if you just click subscribe button and like the streams. And me and Grandmaster Arkady Naiditch are working on this channel together, trying to grow one day. And we would like to give you the most educational content available possible, because I know there are a lot of people which would love to learn from it. And not only the end games, we have the strategy, we have attacking games as well, defense. We have covered a lot of things, and you can check out the recorded versions of the live streams. It's been a long time. We're doing it not so long, let's say, of 3-4 weeks, but back to back every day, sometimes even twice a day. So pay attention and stay tuned. So thank you everyone for watching, and I'll see you next time. I'm not sure, maybe tomorrow there will be a stream or not. I'll check it out exactly, but hope to see you soon. See you around. Bye bye. Take care, everyone.